1534, Henry VIII visited this manor house in Buckinghamshire, the first of many visits by the king and his daughter Elizabeth. But the owner knew that the royals expected only the biggest and the best, so he had his home transformed into a palace. But magnificent though this Tudor building is, it's hardly big enough to support the king and his entourage of over 300 courtiers. It must have been at least twice this big. So where's the rest of it? And what exactly does it take to build a house fit for a king? As usual, we've got just 3 days to find out. A historical document mentions a wing measuring 9 chambers from the church to a gatehouse. This could either run along the north or the east of the courtyard, with either one containing the grand gatehouse entrance. Jonathan's preferred option is 2 wings with the gatehouse to the east, giving us a palace large enough for a king and his entourage.
We're talking about a house that Henry VIII visited and Elizabeth, up to 1,000 people descending on it for periods up to a couple of weeks or more. It must have been a very big complex with lots of supporting structures. So my neat vision might be much more complex in reality.
Mick, how do we explode Jonathan's cosy vision of what this place would have looked like?
Well, I think we can look, the 2 wings that are on there that don't exist today, we can have a look at those by putting some trenches across and see if there is any walls in the bottom of them. But of course, the building itself is a piece of archaeology, and it's full, just by looking around the outside, of clues of where walls have joined on, windows have been altered. So there's a sort of 3-dimensional jigsaw to sort out of the building itself,
Absolutely
isn't there?
there is, yeah.
I want to know what the difference is going to be between this painting and what we finally come up with.
Let's get on then.
And so our first trench goes in based on Jonathan's recreation. Here on the proposed eastern wing, close to where he believes there was a grand gatehouse. You're a bit previous, aren't you? We haven't even got the geophys results yet.
Yeah, but I don't think it'll matter, actually. We've got a lot of clues as to what might be going on here. We know about these 2 wings. We can see where that step is there by the fire alarm.
There's different sorts of brickwork there, aren't there?
There's all sorts of stuff going on. We're going to have to spend a lot of time looking at that, because for now it just tells us something's coming off in this direction.
As well as rediscovering this structure and the rest of the palace, we hope to find out why much of this complex disappeared over the centuries. Because historical records show it was large and grand enough to play host to Henry 3 times and Elizabeth twice, a place where they and their entourage could rest, feast and hunt. The house's high status was due to one man, the first Earl of Bedford, John Russell, who had a meteoric rise through the Tudor court.
He was in the service of a man called Sir Richard Jerningham, who was one of Wolsey's key officials. Now, what's important about that is that when Jerningham died, Sir John Russell not only, if you like, stepped into Jerningham's job, he also stepped into his bed, he married his widow.
That was Anne Sapcott, who inherited Cheneys.
And that's how he got Cheneys. But that coincided with Henry VIII taking Russell into the Privy Chamber. He was a gentleman of the Privy Chamber in 1526. Now, he was one of only 8 people in the country who were allowed to touch the king, and even one of those 8, the barber, was only allowed to touch him when the king specifically invited him to do so. So Russell is one of those very key courtiers at the very heart of the Tudor court.
So really you could say that Russell was one of the 8 most important men in the country at that time.
Absolutely. Now, but what Henry also does is he gives him a wedding present, and he gives him the Manor of Amersham next door. And that gives him the money to build at Cheneys.
Oh, crikey, yeah, look at that.
It looks like we've got... See that? There's a mortar surface there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's the holes in the ground that will confirm or sink Jonathan's theory.
You must be inside a building.
Hang on, why do you say that that's a floor?
It's a laid mortar surface. It's very compact. It's evenly distributed. It's laid on these bits of these brick surface. It may have had a tiled floor actually on the top of it, which they lifted off, but that what you're looking at is actual foundation surface for a floor, I think.
And they've got something else over there, haven't they?
Now, this is really the good stuff. Look, we've got these mortared bricks in here, but look, it's bang on line with the end of the wing.
Lines up exactly,
where we want
doesn't
it to be.
Why couldn't that be 21st century?
It could be. I mean, there's still a lot of demolition rubble about it, but that looks to me Tudorish. I mean, one piece of pot does not make a period.
Yeah.
But I would have thought we could be looking at that sort of
It's
period.
almost like that Cistercian ware, isn't it? Which is that sort of very dark green stuff, you know. Yeah, I think it's right.
Well, there's our first bit of Tudor.
Jolly good.
Early days yet, Tony?
Yeah.
The evidence does suggest this wall is Tudor, which, going by Jonathan's theory, means we should be close to the sort of grand gatehouse you'd expect at the entrance to a royal residence. But just as one piece of pot doesn't make a period, one wall doesn't make a wing. So we're putting in another trench to find the other side of our possible gatehouse wing. Trench 2 has also come up with the goods, and it's even more substantial than the wall in Phil's trench.
Okay, well, that's wallish, isn't it?
Very wallish. Got the wall up here, and we've even got some flint footings, which, you know...
Fairly typical, aren't they? Local resources, chalk and flint.
Absolutely,
Good stuff. Good
yeah.
for the Chilterns, yeah.
Not only does this feature line up with the existing Tudor wall by the church, there's even some traces of plaster on it, suggesting this could be the inside of our northern wing.
Here's our Tudor wall, and that does line up exactly on the end of the building. We still don't really know whether we are in a building or, as this material here, this gravel material, might suggest that we're actually into a courtyard surface. The other problem, of course, is that we've got these walls here, and we don't know, again, whether they're a building or whether they're garden features. The trouble is that they've been so smashed around that we got no idea where the floor levels were. We've got the Tudor wall there coming off. Now, what we don't know is whether it's a building, a structure, or whether it's just a boundary wall.
If we go back a little bit, what we're starting to see is a wall running flush, so it's more like a boundary wall. If we go back even further, it shows even clearer this strong wall all the way running across the front.
It does suggest that that wall is no more than a boundary wall rather than a structure.
Yeah, you can't really see any structures.
It's still a bit confusing.
It is, isn't it? I mean, I'd like a painting from the other side.
That's yeah. You haven't got one of those?
No, not at all.
We just don't have any evidence here to back up Jonathan's original theory for a gatehouse. Although the wall may once have been part of a larger wooden structure, for example, a gallery leading to the church. But it does mean our straightforward plan for this site is unravelling in front of our eyes. Hopefully this trench behind the garden wall will find the other side of the northern wing. But just to confuse matters, geophys have discovered these anomalies in the courtyard, suggesting two completely different shapes and sizes of that northern wing. And that means we'll need to dig 2 more trenches to test their results. And if that's not complicated enough, we seem to have lost the east wing entirely. The Archaeology and Archives now suggesting it was just a boundary wall. In the midst of all this contradiction and confusion, Stuart has been fertling around the site in his own inimitable fashion. And he now believes these massive earthworks to the north of the site could be the remains of the formal Tudor gardens.
It's got mortar in it, hasn't it? Are there any bricks in it anywhere?
There is a little bit further up. We've got brickwork.
Slowly but surely, Stuart's evolving his own very different theory as to the whereabouts of the Grand Palace. Plus, the records show it was also at the very heart of a royal scandal.
Henry was showing off Catherine Howard. She was his trophy wife. He wanted everybody to see her. I mean, the irony is, of course, that a week later, she is denounced for adultery. And in fact, there is also evidence in the National Archives that while at Cheney's, you know, she was engaged in a liaison with Thomas Culpeper.
Oh, really? Actually here?
Absolutely here, yes, because the evidence against her actually mentions Cheney's.
If you're approaching from that direction, you're going to approach from the back end of the church.
Yeah.
That's going to be the first thing you see, the rear of it.
Yeah.
And why would you want to approach from the back of the church? It seems just to turn its back on everything. You want to celebrate this building.
It's halfway through day 2, and we've got almost nothing to show for it. But that suddenly changes when we get the dendro dates for the west and south wings.
This bit here comes much later, in the summer of 1550.
Hang on, whoa.
Yeah,
When did Henry VIII come and stay here?
1540, 34 and 41.
41.
And we've been
this isn't even Henry
assuming...
VIII's reign. This is not part of Henry VIII's reign in that case.
We've been assuming that this is the constant. This is the reason that we came here, because we'd got a bit of the place where Henry VIII stayed.
So the building is elsewhere?
Yeah, the buildings that Henry saw
Are elsewhere.
are elsewhere, although he did see this one behind me.
So this wing on which we've based so much of our digging strategy wasn't even built until after Henry VIII's death. And that means we can turn this dig on its head, distilling a new layout for the house. And this is it. With the main entrance to the west and a grand set of lodgings to the north overlooking terraced gardens, which is where our new trench will go in. Unfortunately, it's in the most inappropriate spot on the whole site, jammed in between a wall and our portable toilets. Ah, the glamour of archaeology.
I mean, look, you've got Queen Elizabeth comes and stays here for a month in 1570 and visits it repeatedly. She loves the old rambling house. We've got details about her secretary saying it's not in a decent state for her to come and stay. You know, we've still got a Tudor monarch staying here. It's just a different Tudor monarch.
Yes, if you can loosen this lot up, that'll be a lot easier.
Over at the portable toilets, it seems that the doubting Thomases were right. Within inches of the concrete surface, Phil's uncovered some tantalising remains.
So what do you reckon then, Jonathan? Is it Tudor?
Well, what I can say is this, that all the characteristics are there for it to be generically Tudor. I mean, it's inevitably difficult...
What do you mean, generically
Well,
Tudor?
because each site has its own brick firing clamps and, you know, reuses material. It's set in soft lime mortar in the right way, the bricks are roughly the right size, and they seem to be making an English bond, which is the pattern of having the ends of the bricks all in a row, the sides all in a row, alternate, and they get fed up with that by about the middle of the 17th century, so it's good.
It looks like we may be finally in the right place. And surprisingly, it does tie in with our new plan for the site.
What we've got here is the wall of a narrow range of buildings which led from the chapel at one end with the hall and the big house at that end.
Why do you say a narrow range?
Well, it's like a corridor, because this being one side of it, we're on the outside, that's on the inside, and where that wall is there...
This one here?
Yeah, that's on top of what we think might be Tudor wall underneath. We can't prove, that's speculation, but we haven't found any evidence of any buildings over there. If I try it on here for you.
Hang on, where are we?
We're stood about here at the moment.
Yeah.
What we seem to have is a wall that came off the end of there to close a courtyard. And here we have a corridor, a narrow corridor range coming down here to join the chapel there.
Yeah.
That would link into where the hall was, there. And then coming off from there would be this big fine building that we've been looking for. This is the bit that connects the big smart house with the chapel at this end.
It might not be as glamorous as we'd expected, but this narrow range is the one that features in the 1585 inventory, running from the church to the grand building Phil's digging, replacing Jonathan's original theory of a quadrangle building for this new layout. A layout that now seems to be confirmed by Phil's trench, where this wonderful bay window has been unearthed.
So we've got a group of bay windows on that north side looking down onto the gardens.
Which is all the terraced area?
Yeah.
Right.
We also think we've now found the main entrance to the complex, which includes some of this standing building.
Jonathan's thinking seems to be that we've got the gatehouse is actually not a building with a tunnel under it and arches, which is what my initial thought
That's what
was.
I've been thinking of for 3 days.
More likely a couple of buildings either side of a passageway, which would have been cobbled, of which that's one, and the other one probably ought to be somewhere here.
But the only way we can be sure we've got the right dimensions is to dig and geophys this whole farmyard. So bish-bosh here and bish-bosh over there?
I would have thought so, yeah.
There's a lot to do with just a day to go. Our new plan may be causing headaches for the archaeologists, but it's completely transformed our understanding of the archives.
This is a cracking piece of archaeology, isn't it?
Thank you, Mick.
It really is. Do we understand it now?
I think we actually do. I think what you're looking at here is the front facade of the Royal Lodges. We think it's actually built in probably 2 phases. They put up one skin of bricks and then added. But the most obvious thing are these 2 bay windows, one there and one over there, which they've actually added on to the front of the building.
So it's got a whole series of glass windows up the front of it.
It really shows how important this is. And we checked this out. It could have been a garderobe. Turns out that, in fact, it is just a massive bay window.
Yeah, we've had glass out of here as well.
Oh,
so
right.
Anyway, once we come into the building, we've got a room on that side and a room on that side.
So a partition wall down the middle.
Well, it's more than a partition. Look at the size of it. Look at the
It's
foundations.
as big as the outer wall, isn't it?
And you see here, look, you see we've got a whole series of these little niches cut into that wall. Now, I reckon that's where the flooring joist would have been. So if you allow for the flooring joists and allow for the floorboards on the top, I reckon that floor level is about here, and you would have looked out down over the valley.
So it would work out to be about 30 foot in depth, and you could say it is literally palatial.
We may not have found a Tudor ensuite bathroom, but these remains show the sheer scale of the apartments that would have greeted the royal entourage. This new layout has got one final treat in store for us. After careful measurement and cross-referencing with the 1585 inventory, it seems we may have stumbled across the bedchamber of a certain Henry VIII.
By 1541, when Henry came here, he had a badly ulcerated leg, and he wasn't as mobile. And in fact, he would have stayed in this building on the ground floor, not the first floor, as a monarch would normally have done.
Where's that?
Well, we think that because when Henry VIII's bed was actually given away by the second Earl of Bedford in 1585, it was actually on the lower floor, in the lower chamber. Now, the royal bed was absolutely huge. You didn't just bring it into the room, it was probably built inside the room and wouldn't go out through the door.
It's bizarre, isn't it, that we're in this old bus, and yet at some time in history, King Henry VIII might have been just here, gazing out into the garden with his suppurated leg.
Well, I think that's entirely possible.
And this would have been just one small part of the fair lodgings that Sir John Russell had built for his royal visitors. Because wedged between the dining bus and the portable toilets, geophys have been able to confirm Stuart's suggested extent of the missing Tudor range.
As we get up to the line, there's a definite response where the front wall is.
We've got a clear demarcation there.
Right.
And that lines up perfectly.
Oh, excellent. That's
with the
Phil's
walls
excavation
in Phil's
walls,
trench going through there. Possible back wall at that point there, running through. Just this side of the bus.
Under the concrete.
So if we hadn't have parked the dining bus there, we might have been able to have a look at it.
And yet all that now remains of this grand palace is a beautiful fraction of its former glory. This is the story of a grand medieval house turned into a palace fit for a king. Its facade further embellished with modish and very impressive bay windows by the time of Queen Elizabeth's month-long stay in 1570. And dendrodating shows that by this time they'd also added another wing to the south of the complex. In every respect, this house reflects the very pinnacle of the power and wealth of the Earls of Bedford, its Tudor owners.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on earth and under it.
This is Hook Court in Dorset, and we reckon that most of what you can see here dates to the English Civil War in the mid-1600s. But there are clues that there was once something much older and grander here. Take a look at this. You see this huge moat? That is in the back garden. Now, as far as I know, a moat means a castle or a grand medieval house. So on this island, there could be something here from the Middle Ages, maybe even from the time of William the Conqueror himself. These days, Hook Court is used as a school, and the teachers would love to be able to tell the kids more about its history. But you don't know very much about it, do you, Mandy?
No, not very much at all. And we'd love you to find out more.
So who is it that Mandy's called in?
Time Team!
And how long have we got to find out anything?
3 days!
You think we'll find anything under the grass, JJ?
Yes.
What sort of stuff?
Brick walls and doors.
Yeah, we always find brick walls, but not doors so often, do we?
Well, there are a whole array of standard features in a medieval house. We've got, for example, the gatehouse there, and that leads you through to a great hall. But, you know, the gatehouse might have been on another side. The hall could have been elsewhere.
So clearly this accommodation block wasn't destroyed by fire during the Civil War, but it's the only bit that still survives. Our job is to look for the rest of the manor house, which should be in this area defined by the moat. Sounds quite easy, doesn't it? The trouble is, there could be 500 years of different buildings buried under this lawn, because the Domesday Book records that there was a manor here way back in the 11th century. The legend is that there was a fire here in the Civil War, and clearly the kids are hoping we can find out more about it. Others, though, are just as excited to see so much surviving in the ground.
Coming through there.
Oh, there's so many.
On a right angle.
So many walls.
And it's only a matter of seconds before Phil turns up the first find.
Yeah, maybe 16, 17. There's the roof. Nice nail hole in there, look.
And you're getting this, which is 16th, 17th, bit of bone as well.
16th, 17th.
Something like that, yeah.
That'd be a good candidate for when it's, you know, being heavily destroyed.
Yeah. There's no later stuff either. So
well, that's good. That's good. Let's carry on, Ian, please.
This is our house burning in the English Civil War, but this isn't Victor's work. This is Bridget, aged 7, and this one is Tom, aged 6. Do we have very many more details other than the fact that it just went up in loads of flames?
We know there was a fire. The whole building might not have been destroyed, but there was certainly enough rubble to make it worthwhile paying a mason, and we have the account, this is the priceless information we've got, paying a mason 5 shillings to retrieve 1,500 weight of lead from the ruin.
Who owned the place?
At that time, it had been just sequestered by Parliament from John Powlett, the 5th Marquess of Winchester.
This is the guy who owned Basing House by Basingstoke, which we dug, what, 4 or 5 years ago?
Exactly, yes, a very interesting guy, a great siege, dramatic moment in history, and John Powlett was a very senior royalist figure and a focus for resistance to Parliament.
Wait. Oh, look, there's there's a new break.
Full profile.
Oh, look at that,
Yeah.
full profile.
I bet that bit goes on the top as well, does it? There you go, mate. Does that go in?
No. Oh, it's a spout, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big pansion.
Look,
big bowl.
there's a spout, look.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing you'd be expecting to see in the 16th, 17th century.
Away from the excitement of the trenches, Henry's got the job of finding the complete circuit of the moat. Helpfully, there's already proof that it continued around here along the back of the now demolished north wing.
You're standing right on the corner.
Oh, right here?
Right on the corner of the moat.
OK.
Which went alongside, up against the building here.
Oh, so where's that on there?
Here's us on the photograph. This is the heating system built into the moat, and the steps are down here.
So whereabouts are we stood now?
You're stood about here.
Oh, so we're right actually on the moat?
You're right on the edge of the moat.
OK.
Yes.
So we're not doing badly. We've got a 15th century living quarters here, and another 15th century building which we're digging the foundations of here, and now we know that the moat extended at least this far around it. Because our mystery building's 2 stories high, the thinking is that it's not the Great Hall. Jonathan reckons that's most likely where Phil's digging on this side of the lawn. But so far, all Phil's discovered is masses of Civil War period pottery.
It's all the sort of stuff you'd expect to find in the kitchen. There's none of your posh tableware here, it's all big mixing bowls, but we're getting things like glazed roof tiles, so, nice posh roof. Bonus, we've got 16th or 17th century goblet.
That is pretty, isn't it?
Beautiful decoration around there, possibly Venetian. I don't know enough about these things to be certain, but that's a posh piece of glassware. That's not the sort of thing a peasant would have been drinking out of, I'll tell you.
But the stuff we're really after is turning up in our trenches in the schoolyard.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's great.
Oh, that is lovely. It's a base.
Yeah, it's medieval. It's this flinty stuff. The key to the early pottery around here seems to be flint and lots of it.
Right.
And this has got flint and lots of it.
Right, what do we have to do, Neil?
Right,
It's the first medieval pottery we've found, the first evidence of life here before the 15th century. And graphics have come up with a neat way to show the kids what it looked like.
And then, I suppose,
that it?
expression's good, isn't
Yeah,
it?
no, feel the weight. Feel the weight as well. That's it. Feel it's really heavy.
Yeah.
Is it out of the way, Neil? Oh, feel that weight in your muscles.
Don't drop it.
Oh, what is it that they're carrying that is so agonisingly heavy?
It's lunch. It's a 12th, 13th century cooking pot. It's based on a bit we found outside. It's probably got sort of thing that would have been put on the fire. It even had bits of soot on the outside of it.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, go! Whoops. Out on the lawn, Matt's now opened up a second trench with some promising early results.
I've got your wall, Jonathan.
Good man, that's very definite, isn't it?
Yep, quite a nice, or a very strong edge across there. It's pretty sturdy.
Tell you what I was looking for, Matt. Along there is the corner of that 15th century block.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know how far it extended this way. I was hoping that some way, that you'd find some way of picking up the footings as they run down here.
We have got the start of a cut going across there, but I mean, it might be a robbed out wall or something like that. So there's something there.
Well, it might be, but you've got a wall, but it's the wrong one.
It's the right one, it's just in the wrong place.
Matt's wall is also very different to the one Phil's now unearthed in his trench. They're obviously not the same building. We're going to have to extend both trenches to see more of them. But it hasn't been a bad start, and I want to use a bit of graphics magic to show Mandy what we have sorted out. Here is the house as it is now, and if you do away with the 19th century extension over there, and in addition to that, another 19th century thing, if we get rid of this porchway just there, it's gone. And then there's this 17th century top bit, just lose all of that. And then we've got two 16th century things here and here. Off they go. And then, apart from fiddling around with a few of these windows, what we've got left is the part of the building which is here now, which was here in the 15th century.
That's fantastic.
Not bad for one day, is it?
No, not at all. It's amazing.
So the first job is to extend Matt's trench to see more of the big wall, and also to join it up with Phil's trench, which hopefully will reveal another 4-foot wide wall to locate our Great Hall.
You can see the date. We've got the pieces of paper with the date of it all on.
All the pottery has been put into a timeline for the kids, and the bulk of it comes from the 17th century, when it looks like many of the buildings were demolished after having been damaged in the Civil War.
Tom, any ideas why you think there may be only a few pieces of pottery here? JJ, possibly?
They haven't dug deep enough.
Possibly, they might not have dug deep enough.
Anybody know what that is? Yeah, that's right.
Some of the tobacco pipes date to the 1640s, precisely the time of the Civil War, and the kids are fascinated by them. And joining up the trenches is revealing more finds by the minute.
Can you still see the clapper in there?
It's intact.
It's an animal bell. You see them in paintings by people like Bruegel. This one's got decoration on it that looks like
Look
it's...
at this.
Yeah, possibly a Jacobean, Elizabethan Jacobean. Typical kind of thing you see on wood carving as well. And there's a tiny shield. Do you see that there? So it's possibly a little stamp of the person that the animal belongs to. Possibly for a horse or something. Perfect condition.
There's another lump just here. No,
There. Now, is that arrow above the blip?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that tells you that that blip on the screen is where the wall is. So you could actually put the cane in, like we've done, and mark the position of the wall.
Although geophys are detecting walls belonging to many different phases of building at Hook Court, our basic aim is to work out the layout of the manor house, which may not have radically changed over the centuries. We know in the 15th century that there were posh living quarters here, and another as yet unidentified medieval building here, with the moat going around it. Yesterday, we opened up several small trenches in the school playground to find out more about that mystery building, and one of them has paid off. This small trench has revealed the remains of a spiral staircase, although it's difficult to see as only the base of it's left.
Can you
Point
see
it
the
out.
curving face of the stones
There's a
running around
very
that
slight
way?
curve, yeah.
Very, very slight. You're actually looking at the outer casing of a spiral staircase.
So we now know that there was a spiral staircase linking the two medieval ranges. We've got the first one here, which is this stone bit there, and then across here, and another bit here. It's like a sort of little compressed H shape. That's the earliest. Then we've got this wall here, a little bit of it by where Phil is, and then that long bit there. Cutting through it, we've got this thing here, which is really odd because it's curved. And actually we've got a fourth phase too, haven't we? Because we've got this early stuff at the bottom.
That's right. That stuff there could actually be earlier than our stones. That could be a timber phase, 12th century.
And it's all covered in material from the 17th century, when it's clear these buildings were demolished. Bridges Trench, in fact, may be turning up the first evidence of the Civil War fire. But what we're really after is finds like this. This is a very posh medieval floor tile.
Now, I
Can I hold it?
Yeah, of course. Now, I don't know if you can see, there's like a pattern impressed in it as well.
Yeah, we've got certain curved lines,
Yeah.
straight lines.
Yeah, well, I've kind of taken the rubbing of it with a pencil, just to give you an idea of what was going on. I don't know if you can make this
so
out.
intricate, isn't it?
You've got the geometric pattern coming around the outside, and then this sort of bit of knot work in the middle. If this isn't from a Great Hall or a chapel, I'll eat Phil's hat.
This decorated tile dates to around 1500. Part of a design that, when complete, would have looked something like this. What's just dawned on me is that our manor house probably included buildings both old and new. This is a coxcomb tile that would have adorned a roof built in the 14th century. Because typically the Great Hall is situated opposite the entrance, so it should be in the middle of the lawn, more or less where Bridge has opened up her trench. Given this news, Bridge in fact is wondering if she may have found the Great Hall. She's got bits of decorative stone from a medieval window, and this stone slab that would have supported a large post.
That could be the crown jewel of the entire dig, if it's in situ.
Now the most recent discovery that there's a wall coming through here has got our expert thinking. So after a few calculations...
If we're talking about 16-foot units, which is your regular medieval pole that a mason might use to set out a building, and occurs time and again, what you've got from that stone to this wall is about 8 feet.
8 feet.
A bit of measuring.
That's 32.
And the realisation that we have another wall coming through.
I didn't know you even had a wall here.
Well, I didn't realise that Joe had already started cleaning it until I just walked up here.
Joe, your achievements are very understated.
Jonathan's now thinking we may have found our Great Hall, although its position seems different from what we expected. For the last 2 days, we've been looking for a Great Hall, and we thought we'd got one in Phil's Trench, going all the way down here. Pretty long this is. There was a big pad here for a big column to support the roof there, going right down to there. But just in the last few minutes, our ideas have completely changed. Why, Jonathan?
Because I was looking for the logical solution of a hall going in that direction, but Bridget has turned me 90 degrees and persuaded me that it might be to do with practical expediency of an old hall sitting firm on this site while the rest of the manor develops around it.
With a wall there and a wall there. You've turned Jonathan 90 degrees. This is your theory, right? And you're absolutely convinced that this theory is right?
I'm determined that this theory is right.
Beginning of day 3 here at Hook Court School, where we're looking for a medieval manor house, and the kids have been keeping diaries about the dig. This is from day 2, Seema wrote this. Today it was really cool because the 6 of us went to wash the pottery. We also saw a cow's jaw, which was interesting and disgusting at the same time. And this one from Connie. They filmed me saying they hope to find a forgotten medieval manor house. I found it quite hard because there was a big fluffy thing in my face. That's your fault, Steve. But the big news for us on day 2 was that right at the end of the day, we thought we'd found one of the major buildings stretching from here right over to here, except that Geophys disagreed. John, everyone was so excited and you brought their dreams crashing to the ground. What was the matter?
Well, it's just the interpretation of the Great Hall being here. I think it's where Phil is, where all the action is. That's where all my strong signals are. I do have things coming out here on the geophysics. They are clear, but not as good as over there.
Whether we solved the puzzle or not, the kids are simply amazed at how much history is buried under their school lawn.
The roof tile, I think, is it? Yeah, looks like it. And these tiles are sort of 14th, 15th century, but they're in a 17th century deposit, so it looks like the late medieval roof still standing at the time of the Civil War, and then a whole shooting match comes down, you know? Yeah.
The school timetable's been amended to allow the kids to help as much as they can.
What's your rim or something?
Some of the older kids are having a go at advanced geophysics. Who knows, they might be able to spot something we missed.
Or maybe that there could be actual building and that could be a wall inside it.
Yesterday they helped to survey this area of the lawn, and today we're opening up a trench that they'll help to dig. It's targeted on one of the clearest anomalies on the geophys plot.
Well, that's this circular feature on here, look.
Oh, wow.
It's a very, very obvious feature. There's been a lot of debate about what it might be, but I think my money's on it being a dovecote.
Using the magic of graphics, we're able to show the kids the scale of the medieval buildings. These two are walking through what would have been the entrance to Hook Court back in the mid-1400s. Anyone entering the site back then must have crossed a bridge, because we now know that the moat came around in front of the gatehouse. But the big news today is that Stuart doesn't believe the moat ever completely surrounded the manor house. In fact, he doesn't even think this is a moat.
Well, what do you understand by moat?
Well, there's knights in armour outside and they're trying to get into the house and they can't because there's this big defensive feature.
Yeah, that's the problem I have when it comes to this. Everybody uses the term moat. I mean, I prefer to use the term, at the moment, a water-filled ditch.
Strictly speaking, a moat is a defensive ditch, but Stuart thinks this is designed to impress people rather than keep them out.
This was dug in, say, the late 14th century. People aren't really digging defensive moats in a way, because the nature of the buildings are changing, the nature of the society is changing, and you're starting to get people thinking about decoration and ornamentation and gardens even.
We've been drilling holes into our water-filled ditch and discovered that it's much deeper here compared to where it bends around the site. What's now clear is that this arm of the ditch must have been an extension added in Victorian times, because it doesn't exist on this tithe map drawn in 1840. Meanwhile, at the other end of our possible Great Hall, another intriguing find is about to emerge from the soil.
It's not a bit of copper pipe, is it? A war pipe or something. Ooh, ooh.
Yep. It's a tap.
It's a tap.
Look at that.
This is actually a very rare find. Mick reckons it could be as early as 15th century. I think this is the best find we've had on the site, don't you?
It's the best find we've had for years, that is.
You really think it's that important?
Yeah, I think it's very important, yeah. We're so used to them, we forget that until the 19th century, they're very, very rare.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
This tap is likely to have been used with a cistern like this. It means there was running water here, and our manor house is even posher than we thought. But now it's late afternoon and time to start wrapping up some of our trenches. We have to go with our expert's conclusion that this two-storey building was a first-floor Great Hall, giving us a manor house that looks something like this. Our reconstruction shows Hook Court in the 15th century, the period when we know most about it. But we think this is pretty much how the manor house would have looked at the time it was set on fire during the Civil War. Soon after, all these medieval buildings were demolished, leaving only the posh lodgings and the gatehouse building standing.
Well, you want us to find out about the history of Hook Court. We may not have done the entire history, but we have done the entire owners of Hook Court in chronological order.
Fantastic.
The genealogy of your school.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world with more digs and greater access than ever before.
Look at that, one of the finest manor houses in Britain. Look at this map the archaeologists drew. There's the house, here's the moat, and does it go up to here and then turn around the house? No, it goes hurtling off in that direction. This is the direction the moat's going in, but what on earth's going on? What's it protecting? Well, there have been several theories, from a Roman fort to a royal court, from a chapel to a heavily fortified cattle enclosure. And we've got just 3 days to rip up this field and find out what this has got to do with that. Llancaich is just north of Cardiff, sitting on a plateau of land in the middle of the rolling South Wales valleys. The earthworks we're here to investigate were first recorded in the 1970s. But so far, all attempts to establish exactly what they are have failed.
Where he's coming in now is where that ditch was shown coming through there.
But it makes sense to assume they've got something to do with next-door Llancairfawr Manor, where the powerful Pritchard family once entertained Charles I. And the manor itself, now a museum and education centre, is also a bit of a mystery, because no one knows if it was the first house to be built on this site. So, do we have an earlier moated house, or even a Roman fort in this enormous field? It's a big question, and for once we're not waiting for Geophysics to answer it.
There are definite earthworks there, definite earthworks.
Because some of the team have decided to break with tradition and open a trench immediately. Look at that! Not only a trench, but a big one. Here are the three wise monkeys of archaeology. Ben, how come we got a trench in already?
Well, Stuart had a wander about this morning and he picked up these very low earthworks, but they seemed to line up with a possible moat, so we thought we'd go for it. We couldn't wait any longer.
A couple of years ago, they put a trench across where they think the earthworks were, and they found 2 rows of stones, 2 sort of banks of stones with a post hole in the middle. Until we open up a bigger area, we won't know whether we can identify these stone rows, whether we can find any more post holes. We've got to think big.
Surely this is going to be the easiest dig we've ever done. There's the house, there's the moat, something in the middle, bosh, go home.
Yeah, except the term moat on an Ordnance Survey map covers a multitude of sins.
What does he mean?
Well, all it means really is that somebody's seen a bit of a depression. I mean, first of all, what is a moat? It could mean a water-filled ditch, it could just mean a dry ditch, it could be something that's functional, defensive, it could be for fish, it could just be something that looks nice in your grounds. I mean, we've got no idea what this thing is until we dig it.
So our first trench has gone in over the tantalisingly visible bit of the L-shaped earthworks that everyone is calling a moat.
In this first trench is always so important. I reckon you learn more from that first trench than you do all the other ones you put through. It gives you that first impression of the site.
We suspect this earthwork may only be one corner of a much larger feature with some potentially stunning archaeology in the middle. We need to find out as much as we can about the house. And the most obvious thing about Llancairfawr Manor is that it's a house of wealth and power. Which is probably not that surprising, considering it belonged to a powerful Welsh dynasty called the Pritchards. I know it's early days yet, but what do you think might be the relationship between this house and that field?
If we've got what looks to be a moated enclosure that's heading out across the field, it's always made me wonder whether there's the possibility that there's an earlier building that's there. We just need to try and see if we can find it.
So could our potential moat enclose the ancestral home of the Pritchard family? Well, archaeological digs have shown time and time again that posh houses are built on top of or next to slightly less posh houses belonging to an earlier generation of the family. And it seems unlikely that a house as grand as the current Llancairfawr was the first to be built on this site.
It's as though you might have had a big post in there.
Yeah.
And Ben and Phil have now hit the first evidence of the mysterious earthworks that promise so much.
That bank out there is 1 row of stones. This could be the post hole in the middle.
Yeah.
And then we go that way and we have another row of stones, which is the other bank. Who knows, Geophysics might be able to track it all the way across.
It's lunchtime day 1. We've put in our first trench. It was over where this moat-like feature is supposed to be, and sure enough, it's there. But the problem with this moat on the maps is that it looks vaguely L-shaped, nothing more. But now John has done the geophys. Is everything clear?
As clear as mud.
What do you mean?
Well, I've got an old stream bed for you. Ridge and furrow ploughing, a few lines, nothing that looks like a moat ditch, and I can't see any evidence for an enclosure.
I think we now know even less about this site than we did when we got here. Look at that. Looks like someone sneezed on it in black and white.
Yeah, that's not quite the idea of geophysics, is it? There's nothing in this trench that looks terribly moat-like, and it ought to be here. There's no moat.
Oh dear. So the moat, the reason we came here, doesn't exist. But all due credit to John, the geophys has thrown up something unexpected that has got Ben and the team intrigued.
There's some sort of linear feature, a ditch or something like that, running up here, turning a corner and coming down here. This is enclosing a very large area. And that ties in quite nicely with something that Phil's got at the end of the trench here. We think we've got a feature running in that direction. But until we get a section across that ditch, we can't tell what date it is. It might be nothing at all to do with the medieval period. It could be something much earlier.
And what's intriguing about this newly discovered enclosure is that it and what's inside it appear to be under, in other words earlier, than the medieval ridge and furrow ploughing.
Oh well, let's have a go. Carry on and we'll see what we get.
So as well as investigating it in Trench 1, we're opening a second trench further along its northern boundary. This morning, I thought this big field presented us with one of the easiest, most straightforward time teams we'd done in a long time. 9 hours later, I'm not so sure.
What the Royal Commission saw were two banks and a slightly hollowed area in the middle. And I think what has created one of the banks is this big stony feature running through here.
So a lot of our effort is now shifting to the area immediately around the standing Tudor manor house, as we try to find any previous buildings that may have stood on this site. The test pits are so close to the house because geophys have already eliminated an area further to the south that Stuart thought may contain a hendra, an early Welsh settlement. We're putting in a couple of trenches here because we'd expect an earlier manor to have a defensive wall and a gatehouse, because during medieval times, this was the wild Welsh West.
Isn't that wonderful? That looks very prehistoric, and it looks like it's tending more towards the Bronze Age than Iron Age. But let's have
I was going to say, let's have the local knowledge.
It's got to be Bronze Age, isn't it? Bronze Age, yeah.
That is stunning.
That's really something. I've never dug a piece of Bronze Age pot up in my life, and I've been digging over 50 years.
This pot suggests that people may have been living here during the Bronze Age. And when you consider the whole population of the UK 4,000 years ago was only about 200,000, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. But just as I'm beginning to think this is one of the most frustrating sites we've encountered in a long time, we make our first proper medieval find.
Gentlemen, I think that might interest you something.
Oh, that's a bit nice, isn't it?
This little coin is a major discovery because we suspect it dates to before the time of the current manor house.
That's a little penny, isn't it? Long cross? Long cross penny.
Got the cross on one side, hasn't it?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, because if you have a close look at it, there appears to be a cross on both sides.
Let me put my glasses on.
Look.
And would you believe it, it's not from the garden, it's from the moat field that we dismissed as having nothing medieval in it. It's the beginning of day 3 of our dig in South Wales.
Ow!
And it's not just the weather that's taken a turn for the worse.
Have you started then?
Well, we'd like to start if you tell us where you'd like us to dig.
Well, you're there.
The mood's also darker amongst the diggers.
Yes, but it's where that, you know, we can't dig it all.
In spite of our best efforts, we can't find any evidence of an earlier manor here at Llancaich. But we're not giving up yet, even if it means we have to turn the whole garden upside down. Nigel, you've got a dendro date for us?
I have, and that date is AD 1548 to 1565.
1548 to 1565, and you're pretty certain about that?
Yeah, absolutely, it's black and white.
OK, thanks ever so much, mate. Bye. You murmured the word later. Yeah? What do you mean by that?
I mean, sort of all things in the sort of commission volume suggesting around the 1530s, so 1548 to sort of a little bit later than we thought, but
you know, got a date.
What does that date tell you about the house?
It tells us that the house is more old-fashioned than we thought, really.
And you've been looking after this house and doing all this reconstruction for ages, but you've never actually known how old the house was.
All we knew was around the 1530s. Well, you know, that's just fantastic to know. That's the thing, because we've never known.
With this date of roughly 1550, we've at least answered one of Diane's questions about Llancaich. It also makes the coins we're finding in the next door field all the more intriguing, because they predate the standing house. As well as this fantastic find, we've also discovered coins that are over 100 years earlier than the current house.
Well, what you can say with absolute certainty is that people have been here for at least 4,000 years. And we do have a lot of ditches. They've been redug. They've been redug by hand. What is absolutely indisputable is that we've got one piece of early Bronze Age pot. That's going to take us back to about 2000 BC.
Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.